So let's go through a quick live demo of the UVM offering. As you may know, UVM came to Zscaler through the Avalor acquisition. It is the first app that was built on top of the Avalor data fabric, now the Zscaler data fabric, which more applications will be built on top of in the future. But we will be going through a demo that touches on data fabric areas and vulnerability management areas. When our customers purchase a UVM license, they get all of it. So we're now starting from ingesting all the data into our UVM instance. So I'm here in the configure area of the platform. I can add sources, integrations, build my data model, write workflows, etc. from this space. This is more of a fabric area, whereas the application solutions are here. You can see our vulnerabilities app, which we will get to in a second. So we start from ingesting the data. I have a very large library of connectors to select from. I can build a new data source, bringing in all the data sources that we talked about. So we have pre-built connectors for all of these sources. But you could also bring in any type of data from a file, a database, anything that you have internally in a spreadsheet, you can bring through our any source capabilities. So you can build your own connectors in a sense with clicks, not code, and build any type of data and add it into your UVM instance. So any one of these connectors that I have in my environment, I will then be able to map into the Avalor standard data model, or the UVM data model in this case. So the idea is to bring in findings and assets and components from different sources, but then unify them all to one baseline. This is a finding, this is the key, this is the title, this is the severity, etc. So you can see for each source this type of mapping experience. On the left-hand side, we see the vendor that we're bringing the data from. On the right-hand side, we see the standard data model in the UVM offering, and we basically map fields or logic from one side to the other to kind of decide how the normalization and contextualization is going to look like inside the UVM app. So after I've brought in all of my data, it's going through a process of deduplication. For example, if I'm bringing in the same asset from a couple different data sources, I can see under my vulnerabilities app all of my assets now. These assets are actually deduplicated based on different qualities. So in this case, I have one asset. I see all the findings that are related to it. And I see that it came from both Qualys, two sources from Qualys, and my ServiceNow. We identified it's the same asset, and now I can see all of the qualities across all these different tools that discovered it in one place. I can see that for all of my assets, and I can kind of sort them by their risk score based on their open vulnerabilities. So we brought in all the findings. We said it could be vulnerabilities, it could be misconfigurations, etc. And then here I can see all of them inside. If I click, they're sorted obviously by severity. If I click on one of them, I can see more information. So I can see the CVE that was detected, which source it came from, when it was first and last seen, the actual asset that this is on, and most importantly, I can see the severity score. Now I see this specific finding started as an 8.6 and was raised to a 9.2 in Avalor. If I scroll down here, I see the exact explanation for why this is the score that I got. So I see this model that's taking in the standard industry scores, the base score, or maybe the original score that the scanner gave us. And on top of that, it adds some weights to attributes of the assets or the vulnerabilities and gets us to a true 9.2, right? We see this asset is publicly accessible, the vulnerability is non-exploited, it's a crown jewel, it has PII, it's a production environment. This is a true critical, right? Even though it started from a 7.5, this is really a dangerous one. So this is a good example for how our scoring logic works, but as we said, everything is very customizable. So if I go over to my settings, I can control how this is calculated and adjust it based on the customer needs. So I can actually start from adding or removing fields from the base score, or even changing their percentages. And then for the risk and mitigating factors, every piece of data that I've brought in from my sources can be made into a risk or a mitigating factor that will affect the score. So I could have something that's very soft, like a crown jewel tag in my CMDB or on my scanner that I'm taking and then making into this risk factor that really raises the score. I can add or remove any field on the asset, the global vulnerability, the finding itself, and I can change the weights and the conditions and really get to a very custom specific logic that builds my scoring. So I say I have risk factors, these will raise the score. I have mitigating factors, these will reduce the risk. So this is how our scoring is calculated. So as you see, we have this huge list of findings. They're sorted by severity. I can kind of see the impact that this new scoring mechanism has made on my severities, which is really interesting. But what I also see is I get some more deduplication here. So our goal in UVM is always to reduce the noise and help teams have less to look at. So if I go over to my tickets page, I can actually see that similar findings are grouped into one ticket that could be typically assigned to one team for remediation and have a single SLA and really have potentially a single or a few fixes that need to be applied to fix the whole ticket. This is what will be shipped to a case management platform like Jira, ServiceNow, or Freshservice, and will be handled as one work unit. Since we put different findings and different assets and group them into one ticket, we actually reduce the noise by a lot for our teams. So you can see this specific ticket, you can see the status of where it is in the remediation process. You can see all of its findings and how it takes the highest finding scores as the ticket score. You could see the assets covered in it. And you could also see some information on the fixes that need to be applied to actually remediate this, aggregated across all the findings and all the assets and all the components that are documented in this ticket. So everything here is automatically populated by rules that are defined in the backend. For example, how these findings get grouped into tickets is defined by our grouping rules. So again, I can click here and see why these findings were grouped into this ticket. So we have a list of grouping rules that really determine the logic of how findings are automatically grouped into tickets. Again, all of this is automatic to save noise and make the vulnerability program more efficient. So I can see all these rules have some filters that are kind of applied to find the right findings that are relevant for this grouping. And then the grouping logic, all the findings with the same component and the same asset business service will be comprised into one ticket. So I can always add rules, change their order, and really configure this to be very specific to my own logic. And if I go back into my ticket, I can also manually split findings into new tickets and do whatever I need to make sure that I have a task that I'm ready to assign to someone. Once I'm ready, I can create a Jira ticket from here or a ServiceNow ticket, whatever you need to use to assign to remediating teams. And then we get a bidirectional sync. So whenever someone changes something on the ServiceNow ticket, it is reflected in the UVM ticket. Whenever someone changes something in UVM ticket, that is also goes over to the ServiceNow ticket. So we always have this bidirectional sync without needing to do much. You can work wherever fits your workflow. After I've done all this work, my teams are remediating, I want to report on this. So I have a few out-of-the-box reports that I can see here. I have this overview that's showing me all of the operational side of the UVM instance. So again, the finding duplication rate, how many findings I am getting from each of the sources. I have this out-of-the-box dashboard that's focused on the remediation efforts over time, who's improving, who's not meeting SLAs, how much time is it taking to remediate per team. You can play with the date ranges and the measurements and really get some really interesting insights from this. We also have a more higher level risk reporting that's supposed to show how risk is distributed across the environment, across teams, across asset types, across data sources. So this is really interesting insights. We have asset coverage information because once you put in all this data into one platform, we also kind of know all your assets. We know what's covered by which tool. So a lot of our customers really enjoy this piece of figuring out where a technology piece is missing, where we need to deploy something, where maybe you used the wrong tag or you're missing some information on an asset somewhere you thought you had it. So this is also really helpful. Finally, there's a lot of customization available, as always, in our dashboarding and reporting capabilities. So you can build your own dashboards, your own widgets, and your own queries. And then you could actually send them over by email, by Slack, by Teams. You could export the data into an S3 bucket or any other storage technology that you're using. So really, the reporting aspect is really important to us. You can build your own KPIs, your own widgets and dashboards, and then build your own stories of how you want to report on risk and remediation from the UVM application. With that, I think we've completed our short demo of what the UVM offering looks like today.